Long before the name Germany existed, there was only land. Endless forests, rivers twisting through mist, mountains carved by ice and time. It was a wilderness untouched by civilization, yet destined to shape the course of Europe itself. Here, between the North Sea, the Baltic, and the Alps, early humans hunted and wandered. They left behind no kingdoms, no cities, only stone tools and traces of fire scattered in the soil like whispers from another world. As the last ice age faded, around 10,000 years before Christ, the first settlers arrived. They followed herds across frozen valleys, building temporary shelters along the Rhine and the Danube. Over time, they stayed. The hunters became farmers. The wanderers became dwellers. By 5000 BC, Neolithic villages dotted the land. They grew grain, raised animals, and began to shape the earth with their hands. The people of these lands learned the power of metal, first bronze, then iron. Weapons, ornaments, and tools changed not only how they lived, but how they fought. As centuries passed, small tribes emerged, each bound by kinship and survival. In the south, Celtic tribes spread their influence, building fortified hill settlements, trading across the Alps, and spreading their language and art. But in the cold forests of the north, something different was forming: the earliest Germanic tribes. They spoke new tongues, forged new customs, and moved slowly southward from the coasts of Scandinavia and Jutland. By 500 BC, the Celts and the Germanic peoples met along the Rhine. Their border was not marked by walls or treaties, but by shifting alliances and endless tension. To the ancient world, the Germanic tribes were an enigma, fierce, proud, and unwilling to bow. They built no cities, they wrote no history. Their stories lived in memory and song, tales of gods who ruled the sky, the storm, and the harvest. Their loyalty was not to an emperor or a flag, but to family, to tribe, and to the ancient spirits of their homeland. Then came Rome. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rhine in 55 BC, he stepped into a world Rome could not understand. Dense forests stretched beyond sight, villages hid in the shadows, and the tribes that lived there did not submit. Caesar named this place Germania, a word that in Roman eyes meant danger. Over the next century, Rome returned again and again, seeking to conquer and civilize. They built outposts, roads, and camps. They brought traders, soldiers, and laws, yet every step into Germania met resistance. Then, in the year 9 AD, came the disaster that would echo through history. In the deep woods of Teutoburg, 3 Roman legions marched under heavy rain. Waiting for them was a young chieftain named Arminius, a man who had once served Rome, now turned against it. His ambush was absolute. 20,000 Roman soldiers were wiped out, their banners trampled into the mud. The empire had met its match. From that day, the Romans abandoned their dream of conquering Germania. They drew a line along the Rhine and the Danube. Beyond it lay empire and order. Beyond it lay freedom and defiance. But Rome did not leave untouched. Along the frontier, cities rose: Cologne, Mainz, and Trier, where merchants traded wine for amber and iron. Some Germanic tribes fought Rome, others joined its armies. The border was both a wall and a bridge.
Yet, far beyond those rivers, beyond the edge of empire, the Germanic world remained wild, divided and restless. The peoples still lived by the sword and the seasons, but change was coming from the east. Swift, terrible change. A new force was moving across the steppe, the Huns. They would drive entire nations before them, ignite wars that would consume the Roman Empire itself, and set the Germanic tribes on a collision course with destiny. The age of tribes was ending. The age of kingdoms was about to begin. When the Huns rode out of the east, the world of Europe began to collapse. They were unlike any enemy the Germanic tribes had ever seen, swift, ruthless, and unstoppable. Entire peoples fled before them, the Goths, Vandals, Lombards, Suebi, and others. These tribes, once scattered across the forests and plains of Germania, now poured into the heart of the Roman Empire itself. The Romans called it the time of migrations. To the tribes, it was survival. Villages emptied. Warriors led their families across rivers and mountains, seeking safety, land, and power. The Visigoths sacked Rome in 410. The Vandals crossed into Africa. The Lombards carved out a kingdom in Italy. But those who stayed in the old lands of Central Europe, the Franks, the Saxons, and the Thuringians, would become the seeds of something new. Among these, the Franks rose fastest. United under a leader named Clovis, they conquered Gaul in the late 5th century. Clovis did something extraordinary for a tribal king. He converted to Christianity. His baptism tied his rule not only to his warriors, but to the church itself. Faith became power, and through it he bound his kingdom to the future of Europe. As centuries passed, Frankish rule grew into an empire. From their heartlands along the Rhine and the Meuse, they expanded in every direction, over Gaul, into Italy, and deep into the lands that would one day be called Germany. By the 8th century, a single figure stood at the center of it all, Charlemagne. To his followers, he was Karl the Great, a warrior, a statesman, and a visionary who dreamed of a unified Christian Europe. Charlemagne built an empire greater than any since Rome. His armies marched across the continent, uniting tribes by sword and by faith. He reformed laws, supported learning, and crowned bishops and nobles in his image of order. Then, on Christmas Day in the year 800, something extraordinary happened. In the Grand Church of St. Peter's in Rome, Pope Leo III placed a golden crown upon Charlemagne's head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. In that moment, the ancient Roman Empire was reborn, not in Italy, but in the lands of the Franks. It was the beginning of what would one day be called the Holy Roman Empire. But for all its glory, Charlemagne's dream was fragile. After his death, his empire splintered among his grandsons. The Treaty of Verdun in 843 divided the realm into 3 parts: western lands that would become France, eastern lands that would become Germany, and a central strip that would vanish in time. It was in those eastern lands, ruled by Charlemagne's descendants and later by new dynasties, that the identity of Germania began to take form once again. These were the East Franks, a kingdom of dukes and bishops bound by faith but divided by ambition.
In the 10th century, one leader rose to bring them together. His name was Otto of Saxony, later known as Otto the Great. He defeated invading Magyars, brought rebellious nobles to heel, and restored the strength of kingship in the German lands. In 962, Otto was crowned emperor by the Pope in Rome. His coronation marked the true birth of the Holy Roman Empire, not a rebirth of ancient Rome, but a new creation, a Christian empire centered in the heart of Europe, ruled by German kings, bound by faith and the sword. But this empire was unlike any other. It was not a single nation. It was a patchwork of duchies, bishoprics, and free cities, each with its own ruler, its own laws, its own ambitions. The emperor reigned, but he did not truly rule. Still, for centuries, the idea of a divinely ordained empire endured, a vision of unity in a continent of division. From Otto's day onward, Germany would live not as one kingdom, but as 1,000. And though the emperors wore crowns of gold, they would soon discover that the true power of Germany lay not in one man, but in the endless struggle between throne, church, and land. A struggle that would define the Middle Ages. The Holy Roman Empire stood as the beating heart of medieval Europe, vast, fragmented, and endlessly complex. Its borders stretched from the North Sea to the Alps, from the Rhine to the plains of Bohemia. But within those borders there was no single Germany. There were princes, dukes, bishops, and free cities, each with their own ruler, their own laws, their own ambitions. The emperor reigned, but he did not truly rule. In the 11th century, that fragile balance began to crack. The emperors wanted control over the church, especially the power to appoint bishops and abbots, who held both spiritual and political authority. But the popes in Rome claimed that only the church could decide such matters. What followed was not a battle of armies, but a war of ideas, the investiture controversy. When Emperor Henry IV defied Pope Gregory VII, he was excommunicated. His nobles turned against him. In the winter of 1077, the proud ruler of the empire crossed the Alps barefoot, dressed as a penitent, and knelt in the snow before the Pope at Canossa. It was an image the world would never forget. The might of kings bowed before the power of the church. From that moment, the emperors never truly regained full control. Yet the empire endured. As centuries passed, the German lands grew rich and diverse. Cities flourished along the trade routes. The Hanseatic League rose from the Baltic, connecting merchants from Lübeck to Hamburg, from Bremen to Riga. These cities thrived not on war, but on commerce, building fleets that carried German goods across the northern seas. But while trade brought wealth, power remained divided. The emperors of the Hohenstaufen dynasty, Frederick Barbarossa and his grandson, Frederick II, dreamed of restoring imperial glory. They marched across the Alps, waged war in Italy, and claimed divine authority. Yet every victory deepened the empire's divisions. By the 13th century, the Holy Roman Empire had become less an empire and more a mosaic of independent realms. Some were vast duchies, others tiny lordships, no larger than a village. Each owed allegiance to the emperor in theory, but in truth, they ruled themselves.
And then came a new force, an idea that would tear the old order apart. In the early 16th century, a German monk nailed 95 theses to a church door in Wittenberg. His name was Martin Luther. What began as a protest against corruption in the church soon became a revolution of faith. The Reformation ignited Germany like wildfire. Princes chose sides, some loyal to Rome, others embracing the new Protestant faith. The empire that once prided itself on unity under God now fractured along lines of belief. The old balance collapsed. Luther's words spread through the newly invented printing press, reaching peasants and kings alike. Rebellions broke out. Armies marched under the banner of faith. The emperor, Charles V, tried to hold the realm together, but faith could not be commanded.
By the 17th century, the fire of religious conflict had consumed all of Europe. What began as a local rebellion in Bohemia erupted into a catastrophe known as the 30 Years' War, one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. German lands became the battleground of Europe. Armies from Spain, France, Sweden, and countless principalities marched, burned, and plundered. Cities were destroyed, villages vanished, millions perished, not only by the sword, but by famine and plague. By the time peace finally came in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia, the Holy Roman Empire was broken beyond repair. Germany lay in ruins, its population shattered, its unity lost. Yet out of that devastation, something profound emerged. The treaty recognized the sovereignty of hundreds of German states, ending the dream of a single empire, but planting the seed of a new idea. A Europe built not on universal authority, but on independent nations. For Germany, the centuries to come would be a long struggle to reclaim what had been lost, to find order in division and unity in the ruins of faith. But new powers were rising from the ashes. In the north, a small kingdom was beginning to forge an army and a destiny of its own. Its name was Prussia. Out of the shattered world of the 30 Years' War, a new force began to take shape in the northern plains of Europe. It did not rise from ancient Rome, nor from imperial crowns or church altars, but from discipline, ambition, and steel. This was Prussia. In the 17th century, it was a modest duchy on the Baltic coast, ruled by the Hohenzollern family. Its lands were scattered, its resources limited. Yet from these humble beginnings, the rulers of Prussia began to build something extraordinary, a state built not on wealth or faith, but on power. While southern Germany rebuilt its churches and cities, Prussia built an army. Its rulers, the great electors, learned a cruel lesson from history. Survival in the German lands meant strength above all else. The state became the army, and the army became the state. In the early 18th century, this transformation accelerated under Frederick William I, known as the Soldier King. He turned his realm into a machine of discipline and efficiency, where every subject, from noble to peasant, existed to serve the state. By the time his son, Frederick the Great, inherited the throne in 1440, Prussia was ready to challenge the old powers of Europe.
Frederick was no ordinary king. He was both philosopher and conqueror, musician and strategist. He modernized his army, reformed administration, and brought Enlightenment ideas to his court. But when war came, he proved himself one of the greatest commanders of his age. Through the War of Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War, Frederick defied enemies on every side: Austria, France, Russia, and even Britain at times. His army, though outnumbered, fought with unmatched precision. By the end of his reign, Prussia stood tall among Europe's great powers. While Prussia rose, the rest of Germany remained divided. The Holy Roman Empire still existed in name, but its power had long since faded. Hundreds of duchies and city-states clung to autonomy, each jealous of the others. The empire had become a ghost, a relic of a vanished order. Then came a new storm that would sweep away the old world entirely: the French Revolution. As revolutionary armies marched across Europe, the German princes faced an enemy unlike any before, an army not of kings, but of citizens. Napoleon Bonaparte's rise changed everything. In 1806, after crushing Prussia at Jena and Auerstedt, he forced the Holy Roman Emperor to abdicate. The empire of 1,000 years was no more. In its place, Napoleon created the Confederation of the Rhine, a loose collection of German states under French influence. For a time, German lands lived under foreign rule, but within that humiliation, something began to stir.
the idea of a single German nation. When Napoleon finally fell in 1815, Europe gathered at the Congress of Vienna to redraw its map. Germany was reborn, not as a nation, but as the German Confederation, a patchwork of 39 states led by Austria and Prussia. It was unity without union, peace without purpose. But beneath the surface, change was coming. Industrialization transformed cities like Berlin, Cologne, and Munich. Railways spread across the land. A new generation of thinkers, writers, and patriots began to speak of Deutschland, one Germany, one people. But who would lead this new nation? Austria, the old empire of the Habsburgs, still clung to tradition. Prussia, lean and efficient, looked to the future. The question of leadership became a struggle for dominance, a struggle that would soon be decided by war. In 1862, a Prussian minister stepped forward with a vision that would reshape the continent. His name was Otto von Bismarck. Cunning, pragmatic, and ruthless, Bismarck believed that Germany would not be unified by speeches or votes, but by blood and iron. He moved with precision. First, he secured Prussia's borders through diplomacy. Then he struck, first at Denmark in 1864, alongside Austria, to claim the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. Then, 2 years later, he turned on Austria itself. The Austro-Prussian War of 1866 lasted just 7 weeks. Austria was defeated, and Prussia took control of the north. But Bismarck was not finished. To complete his plan, he needed one more war, one that would ignite national pride and force the southern states to join under Prussian leadership. In 1870, he found his chance. A diplomatic dispute with France was carefully manipulated until it erupted into the Franco-Prussian War. French armies crossed the Rhine with confidence. They were crushed in months.
As French cannons fell silent, the German princes gathered in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. There, on January 18, 1871, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed German Emperor. After centuries of division, Germany was united at last. But its empire was born not in peace, but in conquest. And in that moment of triumph, the seeds of future conflict were already being sown. For a new power had risen in the heart of Europe, strong, ambitious, and destined to challenge the old world order. The German Empire was born. The year 1871 marked the dawn of a new era. For the first time in history, the German peoples were united under one flag, one empire, one Kaiser. The coronation at Versailles was more than a ceremony. It was a message to Europe. Germany had arrived. Under Kaiser Wilhelm I and his Iron Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, the new empire grew rapidly. Industry flourished, cities swelled, and railways stitched the provinces together like veins of iron. In only a few decades, Germany transformed from a collection of kingdoms into one of the most powerful nations on earth. Bismarck ruled through calculation, not passion. He balanced alliances, isolated enemies, and kept the peace through fear and diplomacy. His goal was to protect Germany's unity, not to expand it. But power invites ambition, and the next generation would not be content with balance. In 1888, Kaiser Wilhelm II came to the throne, a man of energy, pride, and restless will. He admired the empires of Britain and France and believed Germany too deserved its place in the sun. Under his rule, the empire built massive battleships, claimed colonies in Africa and the Pacific, and sought to challenge the old world order of Europe. yet ambition often blinds. Germany's growing might unsettled its neighbors. France, Britain, and Russia formed alliances of their own. The continent became a powder keg, armed, anxious, and waiting for a spark. That spark came in 1914. An assassination in Sarajevo set the world on fire. Germany, bound by treaties and pride, marched to war. What followed was a catastrophe unlike anything the world had seen. The First World War turned the heart of Europe into a wasteland of trenches and fire. Millions died for inches of ground. For 4 long years, Germany fought on every front, its soldiers enduring hunger, poison gas, and endless artillery. In the end, even courage could not save them. By 1918, the empire collapsed. The Kaiser fled into exile. The proud armies of Germany laid down their arms, and in the Treaty of Versailles, the victors imposed crushing terms. Territories lost, colonies seized, reparations demanded. But the greatest wound was humiliation. Many Germans did not see defeat as fair or final. They believed they had been betrayed from within. It was a lie, but one that would poison the years to come. In the ruins of war, the Weimar Republic was born, a fragile democracy built on hope and resentment. The 1920s were years of both brilliance and despair. Berlin became a city of art, science, and restless energy. Yet beneath the surface, inflation devoured savings, and extremists battled in the streets.
When the Great Depression struck in 1929, millions were thrown into poverty. Amid chaos, one voice rose above the rest, promising revival, strength, and vengeance. His name was Adolf Hitler. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. What followed was the death of freedom. The Nazi regime crushed dissent, controlled media, and built a state founded on hatred. The world watched as Germany rearmed, defied the Treaty of Versailles, and prepared for war once more. By 1939, the illusion of peace shattered. German forces invaded Poland, and the world plunged into the Second World War. At first, the victories seemed unstoppable. Poland, France, the Low Countries, and much of Europe fell under German control. But behind the triumphs lay horror. Millions of Jews and other innocents were rounded up, deported, and murdered in camps built for death. The Holocaust became one of history's darkest chapters. By 1945, Germany lay in ashes. Its cities burned, its leaders dead or imprisoned, its people broken. The empire of 1,000 years that Hitler had promised lasted barely 12. Out of the ruins, the world divided once again. Germany was split to east and west, 2 nations facing each other across an iron curtain. In the east, the Soviet-backed German Democratic Republic built a socialist state behind walls and watchtowers. In the west, the Federal Republic of Germany rose under democracy and American support. Berlin became the symbol of that division, a city cut in half, families separated by barbed wire and concrete. For decades, the world watched the standoff of ideologies, communism and capitalism, East and West, each claiming to represent the true future. Yet history, once again, turned. In 1989, the wall that had divided Germany for nearly 30 years was broken, not by war, but by the will of its people. Crowds climbed the concrete, tore it down piece by piece, and embraced across the border. In that moment, the scars of 40 years began to heal. The following year,
Germany was reunified. For the first time since 1945, there was one Germany again, democratic, united, and looking to the future. Today, Germany stands not as an empire, but as a republic, one of the world's leading nations, built on memory, responsibility, and resilience. Its past is heavy, its history vast, but its story endures. From the tribes of the forests to the ruins of war, from division to unity, Germany's journey is the story of rebirth through struggle. History does not forget, but it teaches. And so we are left with a question. What does it truly mean to be united after centuries of conflict and change? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring the rise and fall of nations, the turning points of history that shaped our world, subscribe, because there are many more stories yet to tell.